The beginning of the big illusion. Most people think banks are simply safe institutions where you deposit money, get loans, and use credit cards. On the surface, that sounds logical, simple, reassuring, even comforting. Bank ads are built around exactly that image. But is the truth really that simple? Of course not. Because at the core of modern banking, the system isn't built on the existence of money, it's built on the creation of debt. Today, a huge portion of the world's money isn't cash at all. It's numbers displayed on computer screens. And those numbers often aren't backed by money that already existed. When you apply for a loan, the bank doesn't pull out a pile of cash that's been waiting for you in a vault. Instead, it creates a new money entry in the system. The moment the loan is approved, the money is created. The moment you go into debt, the system produces new money. And this is exactly where the biggest illusion of the modern world begins. Because while we assume money is a store of value, the system expands it through debt. That turns money into something that grows not when you earn more, but when you borrow more. And this cycle doesn't trap only individuals. It pulls in governments, corporations, and entire economies. So why was the system built this way? And who does this mechanism really serve? In the next episode, we'll break down, step by step, how banks gain this power, and whether it's truly as innocent as it looks. How did banks gain this power? When this question is asked, another critical question immediately follows. Who gave banks the authority to create money out of nothing? Throughout history, the power to issue money belonged to kings, emperors, or states. It was one of the most fundamental symbols of sovereignty. Yet in the modern world, this power has quietly changed hands. Today, beyond central banks, commercial banks have effectively become money creators themselves, and they do so without most people ever noticing. At the heart of this shift lies a system called fractional reserve banking. Under this system, banks are not required to keep all deposited money in their vaults. They only need to hold a small fraction as reserves, while the rest can be issued as loans. But here lies the crucial detail. When banks issue loans, they do not simply lend existing money, they create new money at the same time. The loan appears as a new deposit in someone else's account. In this way, a single unit of money is multiplied repeatedly throughout the system. Over time, this mechanism granted banks extraordinary power because they effectively began deciding when and how the money supply expands or contracts. During economic booms, credit flows freely and money feels abundant. During crises, lending tightens and money seems to vanish overnight. People experience this as economic slowdown or financial tightening. But behind the scenes, what is really happening is the withdrawal of money from the system. Even more troubling is the fact that this power is not directly subject to democratic oversight. Banks are profit-driven private institutions. Every loan they issue generates interest income. As a result, the system evolves into one where banks profit as long as debt continues to grow. Money no longer emerges from production, but from borrowing. And here a disturbing contradiction appears. If all money in the system is created as debt, what happens when everyone tries to repay what they owe? This question exposes one of the most unsettling truths of the modern financial order. In the next chapter, we will clearly examine why a debt-based system inevitably turns into an endless cycle. When we look at the least discussed yet most decisive truth of the modern financial system, one reality becomes clear. In this system, debt can never fully be repaid. The reason lies in a structural mismatch between the money that is created and the debt that must be paid back. When banks issue loans, they create only the principal, not the interest. This means the total amount of money circulating in the system is mathematically insufficient to repay all outstanding debt. Consider a simple example. If banks create 100 units of credit, there are 100 units of money in the economy. But if the total debt to be repaid, including interest, amounts to 110 units, where does the extra 10 come from? The answer is simple, yet deeply unsettling: from new debt. In order for some borrowers to repay what they owe, others must borrow more. This forces the system into perpetual expansion. If the economy stops growing, if new debt cannot be generated, the chain breaks. This is precisely where crises emerge. Debts become unpayable, bankruptcies spread, unemployment rises. But what must be understood is this: a crisis is not a malfunction of the system. It is the system's natural outcome. This structure does not aim for stability. It requires constant growth to survive. That is why economic growth becomes not a goal, but a necessity. People work more, consume more, and borrow more. Governments borrow to cover budget deficits. Companies rely on credit just to stay afloat. Individuals take on decades-long debt for homes, cars, and even education. Over time, debt stops being an exception and becomes the norm. Those without debt are seen as outside the system. And within this cycle, the biggest winners are always the same: those who create the debt. As debt expands, interest income grows. And as interest grows, power becomes increasingly concentrated. Money flows not across society, but toward specific centers. This is why so many people work relentlessly yet never achieve financial security. The problem is not individual failure, it is the system itself. So what are the social consequences of this structure? How do human behavior and psychology evolve under a debt-based system? In the next chapter, we will examine how debt-based money reshapes societies themselves. A monetary system built on the creation of debt has not only transformed economies, but has fundamentally reshaped human behavior and social structures as well. Money is not merely a tool of exchange. It also shapes how people think, what they value, and how they plan for the future. In a system that expands through constant borrowing, even the perception of time changes. Consumption habits shift as people begin spending not only today's income, but future earnings as well. Lives are built on money that has not yet been earned, effectively placing the future under mortgage. This creates a lasting sense of insecurity within individuals, because debt is not just a financial burden, but a psychological pressure. People remain in jobs they dislike, avoid taking risks, and choose compliance over resistance. Debt quietly limits freedom. On a societal level, debt becomes one of the most effective tools of obedience. Indebted individuals, indebted corporations, and indebted states are inherently more fragile. They are more vulnerable to economic shocks, and this vulnerability directly shapes decision-making processes. When a country is deeply indebted, even its political choices can be dictated by financial pressure. Likewise, corporations focus on short-term profits to maintain access to credit, pushing long-term ethical considerations and social responsibility into the background. The debt-based system also deepens inequality, because access to debt does not produce the same outcomes for everyone. Those close to capital, large asset holders, borrow at low cost and use debt to generate more wealth. Lower-income groups borrow at higher interest rates and often use debt simply to survive. As a result, one group grows its wealth while the other becomes trapped in a debt spiral. Wealth is no longer determined by productivity, but by financial position. Over time, this structure is normalized. People are conditioned to believe that a debt-free life is unrealistic. Yet this is not a natural order. It is a designed system. And like any design system, it can be questioned. So what exactly is the great illusion behind this order? And why do people fail to recognize it? In the next chapter, we will examine how the modern, world's greatest deception has been normalized and made to appear inevitable. One of the most striking successes of this debt-based monetary system is its ability to make itself invisible. Most people do not understand how the system actually works, yet they become accustomed to living with its consequences. In this sense, they are complete victims. The system is sustained not only through economic tools, but also through cultural and psychological mechanisms. From an early age, people are taught that earning money, taking on debt, and using credit are natural parts of life. In school, we learn how to make a budget, but we are never taught how the money we budget is actually created. Interest calculations are explained, but the role of interest within the system is never questioned. As a result, people start playing the game without knowing the rules. Media and advertising further reinforce this illusion. A better life is often equated with greater consumption. A house, a car, vacations, status, all are presented through the idea of own it now, pay later. Debt is marketed not as a necessity, but as an opportunity. Credit cards are framed as freedom, loans as progress, and debt itself as a symbol of success. This narrative does not encourage questioning debt. It aims to normalize it. The system also uses language very skillfully. Instead of creating money, it says credit, expansion. Instead of money disappearing, it says market, contraction. In this way, what is really happening is hidden behind technical terms. People do not see where the money truly goes. They only see the outcomes: rising prices, increasing rents, endless debts. Instead of questioning the cause, they internalize it as a personal failure. They believe they need to work harder or spend more wisely. Yet the problem is far bigger than individual choices. The illusion is strongest in uncertainty. As the system becomes more complex, people stop objecting to what they do not understand. The belief that experts must know best becomes widespread. Money then ceases to be a shared concern of society and turns into a technical issue managed behind closed doors. This makes accountability far more difficult. So what happens when this illusion finally breaks? How will people react when they see the truth? In the next and final chapter, we will explore whether this cycle can be broken and how individuals can act, consciously and collectively, within this system. At this point, the most realistic question to ask is this: if money truly originates from debt, is it possible to escape this cycle? The short answer is this: the system will not collapse overnight, but it also cannot survive indefinitely without being noticed. History has repeatedly shown that no economic order lasts forever in the same form, because systems are forced to transform once people begin to question them. A debt-based monetary system is no exception. However, the solution cannot be reduced to a simple, personal rule like never take on debt, because the system is far too large for individuals to escape on their own. The real breaking point is awareness. When people understand what money actually is, how it is created, and why it always feels insufficient, their behavior begins to change. They learn to act with less dependency rather than taking on more debt. They choose long-term resilience over short-term consumption. Over time, this individual awareness can evolve into a collective demand. Throughout history, central bank structures, monetary policies, and banking rules have changed many times. This means the current system is not a law of nature. It is a human-made construct, and anything created by humans can be redesigned. Alternative monetary systems, local exchange networks, digital assets, and interest-free models are all products of this search. None of them are perfect, but they all point to one truth: the current system is not the only option. The most important reality, however, is this: the system feeds most on people's hopelessness. The belief that nothing can change is the strongest fuel keeping the cycle alive. Yet change rarely begins with grand revolutions. It usually starts with small shifts in awareness. When the way people perceive money changes, the meaning they assign to debt changes as well. When money is seen as a tool rather than the purpose of life, debt stops being destiny. If this video has given you just one thing, let it be this realization: the problem is not you. Most people are trapped in the same cycle. And the first step to breaking that cycle is recognizing that it exists and understanding the rules of the game. What comes next is no longer inevitability, but a conscious choice.